Now, I would like to introduce Philip Schultz, the founder and director of the Writer Studio, which is entering its 34th year, I believe. So Philip Schultz has written several collections of poetry, including Failure, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 2008, and Luxury, published in 2018. His new memoir, Comforts of the Abyss, which deals with the Writer Studio's method of personal writing, will be out in the spring, summer of 2022. Now, I would like to welcome Philip Schultz.
Hi, you can see, okay, you can see me. Well, first of all, I want to welcome all these wonderful, all superb writers, and I will in a moment say introduce Bill. First, I like to say this has been, of course, with this pandemic, quite a challenging year, and my wife Monica and I want to thank this community for all it's such gratifying and generous support, and it's made all the difference. Now, I remember running into Bill Henderson on Bleecker Street, and a number 46 years ago, this was late 70s, I think, and his telling me all about this new project, and then taking me to his apartment and showing me a large room filled with boxes and papers and this really amazing project. And I remember walking down Bleecker Street afterwards thinking, well, Bill is either dangerous or extraordinary. And now, all these years later, I guess it's clear that he's extraordinary. The American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters has just given him a Lifetime Achievement Award for doing that extraordinary thing. And I happen to know that under these dire circumstances, he's managed to put out two of the best issues in the last 2 years. So I'm going to use a word to describe Bill, who's also the author of 6 wonderful memoirs, a word that he'll probably never forgive me for, and that's heroic. The effort to continue this under these circumstances is nothing less than that. It's my honor to introduce Bill Henderson, the editor of the Pushcart Prize.
Thank you, Phil and Monica, and your dog Binks, who is brand new to the world, and I haven't seen Binks since the pandemic hit. Binks lives next door, nearby anyway, and thanks to the Writers Studio for decades and decades of celebrating the Pushcart Prize, usually at the Strand, which is a wonderful gathering every year, and we're going to be back there next year. My wife and I, Jeannie, we just got our first shots today. So we're coming back to the Strand, Phil. Thanks also to Joe Guinness and W.W. Norton Company, who have been with Pushcart almost all the way. I can't say enough about W.W. Norton Company because they're independent, they're employee owned, and they haven't been gobbled up by Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster or anybody else. They've kept at it. So thank you, W.W. Norton Company. Thanks to the donors to our foundation, their readers all. We don't have any government grants, only our readers make donations and keep us afloat. Thanks to our board members for the Pushcart Prize Foundation. Kirby Williams is with us from France. Paul Bresnick is with us from Long Island, right around the corner. Lily Henderson, my daughter, is with us from darkest Brooklyn. And Elizabeth Ray is in Connecticut, and many, many more. all of them donate to the foundation, and we're still going just because of them. Thanks to the 200 contributing editors to Pushcart Prize number 45, count them 200 plus. Every year they come through with names of people they think should be honored. And just the mere fact that these people were mentioned means so much to the poets and writers who get some bit of recognition in this crazy world that cares not a fig about most of us. And thanks to the small press editors worldwide. The amazing thing that's happened to the Pushcart Prize over the years, thanks perhaps to the internet, is we're now a worldwide prize. Indonesia, South Africa, Japan, China, England, everywhere we're getting nominations, and lots of nominations. Often mentioning this with major prizes, which is kind of amazing. The spirit of these presses is just what keeps us all alive in this age of giganticism and big money and big bucks. And it seems that only money counts, and our spirit, our joy, our empathy doesn't count at all, but it counts to us, and it always will, and it always has. We small press holy fools don't work for money, and because our writing now matters more than ever, that we were in the midst of a pandemic when people are losing heart, and it's hard to see the light, but it's coming, and we've kept it alive, even more so in Pushcart Prize number 45. You'd think it would be a rough year for anybody to sit down and dream up a poem, but our poets have, and our writers have. Finally, thanks to all our readers tonight. They're all in the Pushcart Prize. They're all just damn wonderful. And it's my honor to introduce Leela Shady, whose most recent book is Deluge, out from the wonderful Copper Canyon Press. She teaches at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She's had a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and her honors are too long to be listed here. Her poems have appeared in Poetry, Plowshares, Tin House, American Poetry Review, and the New York Times. And don't miss her poem in Pushcart Prize number 45. So here comes Leela. Thank you.
So I'm so happy to be in community with you all. I want to start with the poem that was in the Pushcart Prizes, truly one of the greatest honors that I've ever received. So I'm so grateful. This poem is called The Rules. There will be no stars. The poem has had enough of them. I think we can agree we no longer believe there is anyone in any poem who is just now realizing they are dead, so let's stop talking about it. The skies of this poem are teeming with winged things, and not a single innominate bird. You're welcome. Here, no monarchs, no moths, no cicadas doing whatever they do in the trees. If this poem is in summer, punctuating the blue, forgive me, I forgot there's no blue in this poem. You'll find the occasional palacinid wasp, proposals vaporized and exorbitant, angels looking, as they should. If winter, unsentimental sleet. This poem does not take place at dawn or dusk or noon or the witching hour or the crescendoing moment of our own remarkable birth. It is 2:53 in this poem, a Tuesday, and everyone in it is still at work. This poem has no children. It is trying to be taken seriously. This poem has no shards, no kittens, no myths or fairy tales, no pomegranates or rainbows, no ex-boyfriends or manifest lovers, no mothers, no God about which the poem must admit it's relieved. There's no heart in this poem, no bodily secretions, no body referred to as the body. No one dies or is dead in this poem. Everyone in this poem is alive and pretty okay with it. This poem will not use the word beautiful Or is this calling a thing what it is? So what if I'd like to tell you how I walked last night? Glad, truly glad, for the first time in a year, to be breathing in the cold dark, to see them. The stars, I mean. Oh, hell, before something stops me, I nearly wept on the sidewalk at the sight of them all. I think I'll read 2 little poems from Deluge. This is the first poem. It's called Confession, and it begins with an epigraph from Mary when she's giving birth to Jesus in the Quran. She says, "Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten. Truth be told, I like Mary a little better when I imagine her like this, crouched and cursing, a boy God pushing on her cervix. I like remembering she had a cervix, her body ordinary and so like mine. Girl sweat lacing rivulets like veins in the sand, her small hands on her knees, not doves, but hands, gripping, a palm pressed to her spine, fronds whispering like voyeurs overhead. Oh, Mary, like a god, I too take pleasure in knowing you are not all holy that ache could undo you like a knot. And suffering, I admire this girl who cared for a moment not about God or his plans, but her own distinct life, this fiercer Mary who'd disappear if it saved her, who'd howl to hell with salvation if it meant this pain, the blessed adolescent who squatted indignant in a desert, bearing his child like a secret she never wanted to hear. Litany while reading scripture in the gynecologic oncology waiting room. And God said, let there be blood. And God said, blood. And God said, good is a woman with fruit in her womb and not in her hand. And God said, sin. And God did not say, forgive. And God said, I will make a stormy wind. And God said, sun, a breath stirring. And God said, highly favored. And God said, condemned. And God said, I will blot out man whom I have created, for I am sorry that I have made them. And God said, listen, and sank a boy and her like a stone. And I think I'll finish with a small one. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited to hear everyone read. So this one's called Exegesis. I bled. God didn't want to hear about it. He said unclean, and so it was. He said it is harm, and so it was. Want to hear about it? He said unclean. Once a woman wanted, so he did her harm. And so it was first conceived, a woman suffering because a woman wanted. So he said cursed, and then he said blessed. The woman chose to suffer, conceived a God, though she never knew a man. And God knows best. If he calls a curse a blessing, then so it is. And he said she was clean. She never knew a man. I've known men, but never a God that bled and lived. But I did. And I'm going to introduce our next reader. So let me get this pulled up. Lydia Conklin is a current Stegner Fellow in Fiction. They've received a Rona Jaff Foundation Writers Award, 3 Pushcart Prizes, a Creative Writing Fulbright in Poland, a grant from the Elizabeth George Foundation, a Creative Writing Fellowship from Emory University, work study and tuition scholarships from Breadloaf, and fellowships from McDowell, Yaddo, Hedgebook, the Jurassic, the James Merrill House, and elsewhere. Their fiction has appeared in Tin House, American Short Fiction, and the Southern Review. and elsewhere, and is forthcoming from the Paris Review. They have drawn cartoons from the New Yorker, a narrative magazine, and graphic fiction for The Believer, Lenny Letter, Popular Magazine, and the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. Their story collection, Rainbow Rainbow, will be published in January 2022 by Catapult.
Thank you so much to Philip and Isabel for having me, and for everyone who came, 150 people, wow. And also especially thanks to Bill for literally changing my life and all you've done for me and my work for the past decade. It's so great to see you today. So I'm going to be reading from my story in the anthology, and I'm going to read from a little ways in, but all you have to know is that Lee is the narrator and her girlfriend Maddie are trying to conceive a child with their best friend, whose name is Arun. The next day, after Maddie's LH surge, I met Arun at the door to our apartment building, a mint green concrete block featuring Art Deco metalwork and block glass in the stairwell. His hand shook as he brushed ice off his shoulder. Am I early? You're perfect. I sounded like I was hissing, let me steal your jeans. I led him to the living room. Maddie was waiting upstairs because she was too nervous to socialize until the process was complete, but it felt wrong to send Arun to masturbate instantly. Besides, I liked his company. Here was this 35-year-old man, beautiful and brilliant, with a perfect job, and he was fine without a baby or even a girlfriend. He saw a few girls in town and sometimes took trips to LA, returning sunny and fortified. But largely he was the picture of someone who could be satisfied alone. How's Maddie? He asked. I forgot what she looks like, it's been so long. He scratched the stiff chin of the prairie dog we'd all bought on a joyride to Centennial. We'd pushed our old Civic to 80, laughing when tumbleweeds bounced over the hood, the misstuffed prairie dog goggling from the dash. If it weren't for the paperwork, I wouldn't have seen you either. He spoke lightly, as though his sorrow was distant now. Can I get you a drink? Nice seduction technique, he said. It's 2 p.m. How about pork rinds? I'll take a drink. This is the weirdest thing I've ever done. I'd been headed to the kitchen and I turned to laugh. Arun always put me at ease. How could I have forgotten? And saw that he wasn't kidding. His face, forever photo ready, had collapsed around the mouth. You okay? Just get me a drink. His tone was steely. I'd stocked his favorites, beer, Jack and Coke, single-serving cans of a spritzer called Naughty Fruit, but none felt tonally appropriate. I didn't want this baby conceived on an afternoon where we choked back bracing beverages, gripped couch cushions, and suffered. So I reached down a bottle of tangerine schnapps left over from a Christmas pudding, and a bottle of bitters, and novelty soda called Cool Mint Surprise, and I whipped these with egg whites, blueberries, and coconut shavings. The colors refused to integrate, and the drink was a bubbling rainbow. I fit the glass into Arun's shivering claw. He took a swig and grimaced. I wanted to tell him the drink was supposed to be funny, but the moment passed. Why don't you want to raise kids? I asked. The egg white on his chin was an opalescent sheen. You want to know? Definitely. Nothing he'd say would touch me. I'd heard all the arguments. I'd made them myself. Global health, overpopulation, career surrender, drudgery. I hated chores. I hated shopping. I only liked 1 in 100 kids. Those were tricky odds. I'd hate pushing a doll through a castle door 100 times. Mommy, mommy, again. I didn't want kitty barfing diseases. I didn't care about advancing my genes. I didn't want Maddie's body to change. I didn't want to read a book about parenting. But everyone told you that once the kid was born, you were happy. No one would admit they made a mistake, Arun said. By having a kid, I mean. Not just because they wouldn't want to hurt the kid if he ever found out they'd said so, but because of the sacrifice. There's too much investment. Yeah. I'd thought of that when I tried to find testimonials from people who had and hadn't regretted reproducing or hadn't regretted not. That's not why I'm scared, though, he said. I knew I should end the conversation, that Maddie was waiting, but I had to ask. Then why? My nephew, he said, lives in Queens. When he was 4, he escaped his bed. He opened the front door and stood outside until a bus stopped. He got on the bus and rode into Manhattan. No, I said. He did. Arun set his empty glass on our steamer trunk. My brother and his wife were asleep. They think the bus driver was high, but I bet everyone thought Sunil was with someone else. He rode over the Queensboro Bridge and into Midtown. He got off at Lincoln Center, seriously. Arun wore that hurt look he got when he feared we wouldn't believe him. Later, everyone said they wondered about the kid, but no one did anything. He rolled his eyes. New Yorkers, man, no offense. Arun was from New York, but he'd forsaken his past to live as a pure Westerner. Hey, I said, I'm in Wyoming now. If I'd found that kid, I would have scooped him up and ferried him to safety. I would have made him laugh in my arms until his parents claimed him. Anyway, Arun said, this lady found him. You, I said. No, his face darkened. It's not good. Arun never talked about his family. His parents were nasty to him and, I suspected, abusive. Part of his love for Laramie was that it was such a slog from New York. There were only 2 planes a day into town. You saw one dangling in the sky and knew your visitor was on board. They went to a play. Arun frowned. I guess it had some weird stuff. There was a man dressed as a wolf. There was a naked kid. There was a stone people handled. It was a festival entry. The script isn't published. I've looked. I'm sure you would have loved it. So they saw a play, I said, so? I liked the idea of a kid at a play, a head bobbing at knee level, following me to museums and parks and afternoon pubs. Just because I had a kid didn't mean we had to languish in pits of plastic balls. And we could figure out what he saw, right? We could find the script, interview audience members. But what gets me is the time around the play. Like what kind of person, and not to be sexist, but what kind of woman sees a 4-year-old lost in Midtown Manhattan and doesn't call the police? Instead, she takes him to a goddamn play. I looked at the ceiling. I wondered if Maddie was angry we were taking so long. Stress impaired conception. I pictured the wrinkles around her mouth deepening. Something bad happened. Sunil wasn't the same after. He turned into this mini adult. He didn't bounce around like he used to. You don't understand. He was a puppy before. Those questions and silly voices all the time. Even in timeouts, he'd dance in his corner, and then suddenly nothing. And it wasn't just the play. He didn't understand the play. You think she hurt him? My heart surged. I hadn't met Sunil, but I could picture him, his face tightly eager, his little hands grabbing the air, clowning as he bounced from foot to foot. We'll never know. A moody look bled over Arun's face, because he doesn't know. He's forgotten, but it affected him, and he didn't have the resources to process whatever happened enough to tell us. Did she touch him? Did she say something? Did she show him a picture? He gripped his knee. Whenever I think of having kids, I think of that panic. I know it would never happen again, but 1,000 things like it would. Little things, sure, but that day you let the kid loose and it's seeing things you'll never see. He shook his head. That spooks me. I get it, I said. I shouldn't say this crap to you. He raised his tumbler. Your rainbow juice made me do it. I lifted my water and we clicked glasses. But you're not as paranoid, he said. You haven't had my family. He gave a weak smile. He didn't know about my father, about how I'd felt as a kid. My story had always felt whiny in the face of the darkness he wouldn't name. You'll be a beautiful mother, he said, regret wet in his eyes, whether for his own childhood or his missed fatherhood, I couldn't tell. I saw a hairy, upright beast lurching across the stage, a little boy too shy to seize the sleeve of his chaperone. When it came down to assuming responsibility for a floppy body loose in the world, I knew I could be flexible and resilient, that I could put a little person first. Not only that I could do it, but that I wanted to. And not only that I wanted to, but that I had to. Thank you so much for listening. And now I'm so excited to introduce David Wujon. He's the author of 9 collections of poetry, including World Tree, which was a winner of the Lenore Marshall Prize, and Interrogation Palace, New and Selected Poems, which was a named finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He has also authored 2 books of essays on contemporary poetry, most recently from the Valley of Making. Among his awards and honors are a Guggenheim Fellowship, the William Carlos Williams Book Award, and the Yale Younger Poets Prize. He teaches at Virginia Commonwealth University and in the low residency MFA in Writing program of Vermont College of Fine Arts. Thank you.
Great, great, thank you. It is such a thrill to be reading tonight with these wonderful writers and to celebrate two great institutions, the Writers' Studio and the Pushcart. I look around at the other writers who I'm reading with tonight, and I think that I probably was given a Pushcart several years before a lot of them were born. I was a kid when I first got one, and I can't tell you, this was 1981, 1982, how thrilling it was, and how thrilling it was every time I'd subsequently won a Pushcart prize. And so Bill Henderson has done, remarkable work for our art. And I know what a labor of love it is, because one year with Philip Levine, I was the poetry editor for Pushcart. And I remember boxes and boxes of submissions coming in, all of them terrific. And as the Pushcart has evolved over the years, the quality of this magazine, of this anthology, has never faltered. It's an amazing thing. And so I'm very grateful tonight to be reading for you. I'll read two poems. I don't think that there was a day during the Trump administration when someone I knew compared the Trump administration to the Nazis, but there's this important difference. The Nazis could be fiercely and brutally logical. And one example of that is that they were perpetually in search of a good synthetic rubber they could use for their soldiers' boots. So in a couple of the concentration camps, they built tracks. And if you were a bad prisoner, you could get assigned to what they called the shoe walking unit, where they'd test the durability of the soles the scientists were working on. So they'd basically shoot you full of crystal meth, and you'd walk for a day or two until you dropped. So this poem, which is the one in the Pushcart this time, is about that. It's also about the poem's author. It's called 58% is concrete road, 12% loose sand. Inside the iron gates of Sachsenhausen, a dozen prisoners unloading shoes, boxes littering the ground in teetering columns. The gypsies, the queers, the malingerers and Jews, the shoe-walking unit, who now will test the soles of a new synthetic rubber. Before them, the shoe testing track, winding to the horizon and surfaced with Teutonic precision. 58% is concrete road, 12% loose sand, 10% cinder path, 8% mud and meant to stay continually underwater. 4% cobblestone looted from cities in West Pomerania, 4% coarse gravel, a cross-section of every surface where the Reich shall campaign. The prisoners don the shoes. Each has been fortified by a mixture of cocaine and amphetamine. Staring out toward the track, they're jittery, wild-eyed. Today's quota, 25 miles. A freezing rain and a camp doctor observing they are marching machines. The machinery grinding past sunset, moonlight, the cinder paths raising small clouds of dust. Predictably, the shoes prove more resilient than the men. This one on his knees in gravel, that one face down in mud. A chain-smoking corporal stops to examine the drowned prisoners' upturned soles. Measurements are taken. And thus, David Wojahn has found some content, Another web search, gratified, prurient, calculated, cruel. And now he retrofits these horrors into rhyme royale, for this is a preferred device, though his skill at such forms is doubtful. And thus he seeks the means to turn this deficit to cunning. David Wojahn, who knows little shame, though to utter this in couplets, to utter this in quatrains, delighting as the pixels neatly stagger on a screen is seen by him as evidence of craft, is seen by him as a plea for social justice, a theme in his poems which has sometimes been praised. I would ask David Wojahn to step closer, to gaze upon the shoe-walking track anew, the shoe-walking dead. Bend down and touch. Stroke this bloated face with the left hand first and then the right. A bookkeeper from Danzig, open-eyed, a bookkeeper like your mother. You have fashioned him and have betrayed him utterly, and for this you will not be forgiven. I want to read a second poem. It's an elegy from one of my first poetry teachers. His name was Etheridge Knight. He died in 1991. He wrote some astonishing poems. It's a poem you really want to read called The Idea of Ancestry, which seems to me one of the greatest poems in American English. If you look at his name on the web, one of the first things you'll probably find is a statement he'd often make at the start of his readings. He said, "I died in combat in Korea, and heroin resurrected me. Then I died again in prison, and poetry resurrected me again." He started writing poems in the state prison in Indiana, where he was serving a 20-year sentence for robbing a gas station with what he once told me was a toy gun. He's a really kind and gentle man. He's such a gifted teacher, but the demons that troubled him followed him all of his life. There are a few lines in this poem that are sampled from one of his books, Belly Song, called "Written on the Anniversary of My Teacher's Death." Etheridge says he'll wait in the car. This is Minnesota. This is 1970 something. This is snow. This is Etheridge still among the living, though not today doing well. Where is the correctness, the proper posture, the serious love of living now that death has fled these quiet corridors? The snows of yesteryear. I'll tell you exactly where to find them. They're swirling the parking lot of Midwest Federal Savings and Loan. They're falling upon my dumbass 21st year, and on the passbook I will use to withdraw 3 20s and a 10 so that Etheridge might do slightly better. He has, after all, his poems to write, which sear the page. Then when I drop him off on a Lake Street corner, it is not his poems which propel him forward, out the door and down the snow-compounded block, new snow mottling sooty cairns of the old. Our steps have been shaped by the cages that kept us. We glide sideways like crabs across the sand. Dope sick, he turns and waves, fedora askew, jacket too thin for January, the fretwork of scars crisscrossing his chin. He has come back from the dead again and then again, and never with glory, for how could resurrection and a sheaf of poems rival the rush and thrall, that goldening hurt that will not cease until it fells you one last time? And the day opened to the sound, kadoom, 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 doom, kadoom, doom, doom, and our feet moved to the sound of life. Head bowed, he moves already like a hungry ghost, past the bars and locksmiths and the surgical supply shops, their neon pulsing like blizzard and silvered runway night lights, red then blue. Red then blue, in this land where the jealous god oblivion hunkers enthroned, where the chosen ones, the meager, afflicted chosen ones, await his deliriant kiss of peace. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Meng, who's the author of the novel Little Gods, which was longlisted for the PEN Open Book Award. Her work has appeared in magazines including Vogue, Threepenny Review, Plowshares, and in the anthologies Best American Short Stories and Pushcart Prize. A Kundiman Fellow, she has received support from the Steinbeck Fellowship, the David T.K. Wong Fellowship, the Elizabeth George Foundation, and elsewhere. She is currently at work on a collection of short fictions entitled Self-Portrait with Ghosts, and a novel, Mothers and Girls, a fake memoir, for which she received a 2021 Creative Capital Award. Meng.
Thank you. Thank you to all the brilliant readers, to Bill, to Philip, Isabel, to the Writers Studio and the Pushcart Prize. I'm so thrilled to be here tonight with you all 152 of you in cyberspace. I'm going to read tonight from the beginning of my story in the anthology titled In the Event. In the event. In the event of an earthquake, I texted Tony. We'll meet at the corner of Chinaman's Vista, across from the cafe with the rainbow flag. Jen had asked about our earthquake plan. We didn't have one. We were new to the city, if it could be called that. Tony described it to friends back home as a huge village, but very densely populated, I added, and not very agrarian. We had come here escaping separate failures on the opposite coast. Already the escape was working. In this huge urban village, under the dry, bright sky, we were beginning to regard our former ambitions as varieties of regional disease belonging to different climates, different times. Firstly, Jen said, you need a predetermined meeting point, in case you're not together and cell surface is clogged, which it's likely to be because, you know, disasters. Jen was the kind of person who said things like firstly and because disasters. She was a local, born and raised and stayed. Tony had met Jen a few years ago at an electronic music festival back east and introduced us, thinking we'd get along. She had been traveling for work. Somehow we'd stayed in touch. We shared interests. She worked as a tech consultant but composed music as a hobby, and I made electronic folk songs with acoustic sounds. The ideal meeting place, Jen explained, is outside, walkable from both your workplaces and likely free of obstacles. Obstacles? Collapsed buildings, down power lines, blah blah, hazmat, you know. Chinaman's Vista was the first meeting place that came to mind. It was a big grassy field far from the water, on high ground. Cypress trees lined its edges. In their shade, you could sit and watch the well-behaved dogs of well-behaved owners let loose to run around. We had walked past it a number of times on our way from this place or that, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the taqueria, and commented on its charm with surprise, forgetting we'd come across it before. In the event of a significant earthquake and the aftershocks that typically follow significant earthquakes, I imagined we would be safe here, from falling debris at least, as we searched through the faces of worried strangers for each other. Other forces could separate or kill us. landslides, tsunamis, nuclear war. I was aware that we lived on the side of a sparsely vegetated hill, that we were 4 miles from the ocean, a mile from the bay. To my alarmed texts, Tony responded that if North Korea was going to bomb us, this region would be a good target, reachable by missile, home to the richest and fastest growing industry in the world. Probably they would go for one of the cities south of us, he typed, where the headquarters of the big tech companies were based. Nuclear blast wind can travel at greater than 300 miles per second, or m/s, Tony wrote. Tony knew things like this. He clarified, meters per second, which gives us, I watched Tony's avatar think, approx 3 minutes to find shelter after detonation. More likely, we'd get some kind of warning X hours before the bomb struck. Jen had a car. She could pick us up. We'd drive north as fast as we could. Jen's aunt, who lived an hour over the bridge, had a legit basement, concrete reinforced during the Cold War. I thought about the active volcano 1 state away, which, if it erupted, could cover the city in ash. 1 very large state away, Tony reminded me. But the ash that remained in the air might be so thick it obscured the sun, plunging this usually temperate coast into winter. I thought about the rising ocean, the expanding downtown at sea level built on landfill. Tony worked in the expanding downtown. Was Tony a strong swimmer? I asked with 2 question marks. His response, "Don't worry, Lil Chen Chen. If I die, I'll die." I was listening to an audiobook on 1.65x speed about a techno-dystopic future Earth under threat of annihilation from alien attack. The question was whether humans would kill each other first or survive long enough to be shredded in the fast-approaching weaponized supermassive black hole. Another question was whether humans would abandon life on Earth and attempt to continue civilization on spacecraft. Of course, there were not enough spacecraft for everyone. When I started listening, it was at normal 1.0 speed. Each time I returned, I switched the speed dial up by 0.05x. It was a gripping book, full of devices for sustaining mystery despite the obvious conclusion. I couldn't wait for the world to end. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce the next reader, Dustin Pearson. Dustin Pearson is the author of A Season in Hell with Rimbaud, Millennial Roast, and A Family is a House. He is a McKnight Doctoral Fellow in Creative Writing at Florida State University, the recipient of fellowships from Cave Canem, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing, and the Anderson Center at Tower View. Pearson has served as the editor of Hayden's Ferry Review and a director of the Clemson Literary Festival. He won the Academy of American Poets Catherine C. Turner Prize and John McKay Graduate Award and holds an MFA from Arizona State University. A recipient of a 2021 Pushcart Prize, his work also appears or is forthcoming in The Nation, Poetry Northwest, Blackbird, Vinyl Poetry, Bennington Review, Tri-Quarterly, Pank, The Literary Review, Poetry Daily, Hayden's Ferry Review, and elsewhere. Dustin Pearson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks to Philip, Bill, and Isabel for everything that's gone into this, and thanks for everyone for being here. I'm going to read 3 poems from A Season in Hell with Rimbaud, starting with the poem that's in the anthology, which is also called A Season in Hell with Rimbaud. I dreamt I was showing my brother around in hell. We started inside the house. Everything was brown besides the white sheets in the bedrooms. I let him look outside the window, told him it was hottest there, where the flames rolled against the glass, as if a giant mouth were blowing them, as if there were thousands caught in the storm, pushing it onward with mindless running, save a desperation for something else. How had there been a house in hell and we invited with time to spend? Why was it I hadn't questioned how I got there? My brother growing so tired from the heat? The sweating? Surely we could open the door, he said. Surely there'll be a breeze. Even seeing already. Even burning himself on the doorknob. His eyes turned back in his head, working his way to the bedrooms, staining the sheets with his blistered hands. And though I knew the beds weren't for the rest of any body, I sat by and let him sleep. Pain on a soft surface. The wind in hell is a scorch screen of momentum. You hope there's a mouth you can crawl in, a soft surface or cavity that could hold you from it. There were thousands of bodies running, but granted a reprieve from the crowd, I always walked. My brother had gone off sooner into the storm and had always been a faster runner, arms flailing with wildness, fully extended from his shoulders. I told myself there was hope in the disparity of our paces. He was the first person who told me I stood out, something my mother had tried to lovingly make me feel, something my father denied completely. I resigned myself to the idea. In a man's world, I'd never be anything, even if I'd still be forced to compete. That thought got me asking when I found the mouth. Had my brother found it before me? Was he still running? I waited by the mouth for ages, wanting to shout for him and being afraid to make a sound for the other bodies. I kept one hand on the lip to reserve it, kept my other extended, and right when I was willing to let myself be unfound, the mouth opened, just enough for my arm to be taken. The lips turned over me and themselves, creating suction for my body to come in. And though the lips were chapped and the skin splintered into sharp razors, I prayed for my sake and my brother's that my pain wouldn't end before his. This last poem is called Lying Down. Every body that hits the ground in hell will get up should they choose it. There's plenty of death and destruction, but no dead. All ends are artificial, wishful thinking, and even running, even seeing their soft resolve lie face down, you feel sorry for them. Some bodies are so far decided, and in some areas, they're lying so dense. You try your best not to step on them, but when you do, most times they don't bother to make a sound. They mimic what they remember of the dead things from when they lived. In the crowds of the bodies still making their way, I found myself running over the planks the lying make, stepping on the backs of their charcoaled heads, their heads inducing a misstep as they sink, as I further bury their faces. It's the stress of the flames behind us that causes this, that encourages our rapid, collective pacing. It's easy to fall. One falling becomes many, and many makes a felled section. But soon enough, the disturbed tide of running finds a balance, and those of us who have gone under, it seems for hours, are forced to be the fodder of those whose timing is better. I remember watching TV upstairs. Upstairs, the entertainment center held easily the biggest TV in the house. Only with the weight distributed as it was with the TV inside, it was even easier for everything to tumble over. My brother half watched while he browsed at the computer. My feet rested on the lower half of the center, not realizing it's rocking as I pushed. I'll admit, I understood badly what it meant to be mad at a person. I thought once it happened, they withdrew from you. You could no longer count on them, and to make things even or protect yourself, you'd also withdraw your protection. My father taught me that. I remember learning the lesson from my brother, but also the day he complicated it. The TV stand began to tip over. Having realized right away, I might have been able to escape, but I merely fell back and waited to be crushed. My brother, with one arm, pushed it back. I remember thinking, why would you do that? Had you been waiting for something bad to happen to me, this was your chance. It would have made me sad, but I would have given it to you. Years back, when we were both tiny, the same thing happened to him. Only no one was there to save him. I can't remember if I watched it happen, but I'd seen its aftermath. My brother flailing under the weight of the thing and crying. I don't believe I would have been strong enough to stop it, but I don't trust the memory or myself inside of it to know I would have had I been. And I thank God for that. I only need to atone for the present. If the only world is a hell with my brother in it, being with him will make a new one. Thank you, everybody. It's my honor to introduce the last reader of tonight's event. Luis Alberto Urrea is a 2019 Guggenheim Fellow, a Pulitzer Prize finalist for nonfiction, and the best-selling author of 18 books of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. He's been honored with a 2019 Pushcart Prize, an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award, and an Edgar Award. His most recent book is The House of Broken Angels, a New York Times Notable Book of the Year, finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and recently acquired by the Hulu Network for a series. His novel, Into the Beautiful North, is a selection of the NEA Big Reads program. He is a distinguished professor of creative writing at the University of Illinois, Chicago.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Philip and Isabel. Yeah, I've won a couple of things, but I never thought I would get into the Pushcart Prize. I was so excited. So thank you. And thanks to all the readers and writers that I'm with tonight. It's really been fun. Fan time just listening to you all. So the story I published is called The Night Drinker. And I wanted to tell you just a little thing about it. I don't want to take a lot of time, but it originally came out in McSweeney's. And it was in the McSweeney's issue called 2040 AD, which is the turning point in global warming, weather chaos, you know, sort of when our last chance moment. And so the writers were given an assignment to write a piece, and each one of us was given a climate scientist to advise us. And I don't know, my mind turned to darkness and strangeness and mythology. So the Night Drinker, just so you know in advance, is an Aztec god, and his name is Xipe Totec. And to me, he's the scariest of the Aztec gods. So I'm just going to read you some selections from the story because it's really long. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Put on my little reading glasses. In those years, the one world, Seanahuac as the Aztecs knew it, was dying of fever. The world was so hot that monarch butterflies easily caught fire in our mountains. Once the whales died, The oceans crawled onto the shore faster than the scientists had predicted. They came ashore like insidious living beings, filling the lowlands and drowning the ports. Many crops perished down below. The Mexican plateau around us was safe from ocean flood, but not from drought. The sea was a taunt from the earth. Those thirsty people and animals were given water that could not be drunk. And in that tide came garbage and dead creatures and black waves. Mazatlan and Vallarta grew beards of bleached seaweed and battlements of ghostly fishing boats, sideways cruise ships now populated by shrieking coastal birds and starving sea lions. The Agua Negra poisoned aquifers as if punishing the land. The catastrophes in the lowlands panicked refugees into moving farther and faster than they had moved before, but they were greeted in every territory by walkers fleeing toward the places they had left. We could not help but be amused when the throngs of gringos rushed the border, heading for Chihuahua and Sonora. But who could judge? The far American West was in ruins. The refugees turned to the highlands, San Miguel de Allende, that great Disneyland of art and crystals and movie stars and peace, already gentrified long ago by expats to the point of pushing local people to the outskirts, began to see walkers from Brazil and Haiti and Honduras and Salvador who were climbing up through Guanajuato on their long journeys to find higher ground. Drought and tides and despair pushed the people, and the refugees rose up the mountains searching for sanctuary. People thought they were safe in San Miguel, but they weren't. When the volcanoes erupted, the little brother rose and brought with him the old religion of the night drinker, Hermanito Jorge. He was here before. He had many followers on social media. He had all those things that seem absurd now, seem like legends of a distant past, things our children will doubt in school, will sleep through and get wrong on exams. I have much to say about him, but we must wait just a moment before we become exegetes of the religion of Hermanito. When it became clear that the eruptions would not finish us off, that we would continue as we had continued through every cataclysmic event that ever tried to destroy Mexico, Jorge told me, I am the eruption, Joaquin. I am the horseman. I thought he was part of the history of my country. I thought I'd write books about this era and this self-made shaman. He thought he was the entire history. You are a demagogue, I replied. We had developed that relationship that Mexican men so enjoy with each other, an intimacy of bluster, a romance of insults. You'll see, cabron, he said. What did that old racist H.P. Lovecraft call it? Eldritch horror, I believe. Before I relate the rest of this narrative, our own visit to the mountains of madness, I feel compelled to insist upon my theory as it relates to catastrophe. The human mind in distress cannot hold on to reason. And the degradation of the planet is not simply a scientific or ecological conflagration, but also an eroding of the human mind. Reason itself catches fire and burns. The fevers make men see the dead, hear voices. Even the hills and lakes went mad. The earth itself had typhoid. The hallucination of history broke loose among us. Popocatépetl, the mountain that smokes, has always been our sentinel. The volcano both loved and feared throughout time. The place where Mexicans could look to see snow, that most unlikely Mexican vista, father of pines and deer, maker of clouds. And Popo was stern with us. He erupted in sequences that inspired Chilangos to mount popocams that celebrated its paroxysms in such old platforms as Twitter. Like the creeping heat and the rising seas, its eruptions became regular to us. We shrugged one shoulder in old school Mexican fashion and drank toasts to the mountain in our bars, never believing the worst could happen, for this was mere gringo paranoia, or the fretfulness of the rich and the bourgeois. Disruption was not what they wanted, and they were moving to Aspen and to New York. One of them flooded and began to rot as soon as they got there. This amused us. When Popo erupted, truly erupted, it was an explosion that shattered the top third of the mountain and bombarded the city with missiles of burning rock. His being 70 kilometers from Mexico City was a true blessing. Hermanito organized armies of heroes through his network. Social media, if you could raise a signal. Shortwave radio for others. Runners in the old Aztec style as well, making their ways across crumbling earth. His followers dug through the ruin with their bare hands and rescued the famous image of the Virgin of Guadalupe thrown to the floor. But, of course, it was a miracle, undamaged. If I may offer you one thought about Mexico, it is this: the past is not the past. Even if the pagan spirits do not exist, we summon them into being. And this is what we did. Hermanito Jorge had a specific theme that narcos and sicarios, without knowing it, had begun reenacting Aztec human sacrifice rituals. Their worsening depredations, lovingly chronicled on video, fed the gruesome interests of working class Mexico, the people who read the weekly tabloid Alarma, with its infamous photographs of murder, torture, dismemberment, accidents. Hermanito Jorge maintained that the reenactment of sacrifice would awaken the old gods who would come to portals between worlds, thinking that we had returned to the true religion. But sooner or later, their joy would collapse into rage. These sacrifices were not loving gestures to save the world, were not ceremonies beseeching the gods for mercy and increase, but irreligious acts of greed and commerce. If you hadn't followed him on his media feeds, you would never know or understand what Hermanito Jorge meant when he launched the meme XT. XT was everywhere. The postings said, XT has returned. XT reaps his harvest. XT for the new skin. XT is the sacred night drinker. He was speaking of Xipetotec, the flayed one, who needed fresh human flesh to live, and who at night drank the blood of the citizens of Mexico. That's it. Thank you for tuning in.